Hello, this is an A-Level Edexcel English Literature video about the unseen poetry anthology. I'm going to be going over the poems extremely quickly, like I'm just doing a really light summary, so you will have to, read the poems and annotate them. And I have put my annotations in after each so you can see what I've written if you can read my handwriting. But yeah, this is just a very brief summary video. The first poem in the anthology is Eat Me, and the main themes are appetite, hunger, greed, lust, power, gender, and submission. And in the poem, a feeder husband has a fetish for overweight women, and his victim eventually revolts and suffocates him. The structure has 10 terracets, a rigid structure reflecting the repetitive feeding habits, and the full stop on every stanza gives us time to reflect on the abuse. It has a staccato rhythm and half rhyme. It also has anaphora repetition, and it's a dramatic monologue. The voice is first person of the victim of the abuse, the woman, and it uses a lot of personal pronouns. Some quotes from the poem, like Globe of a Cheek, Desert Island, Soft Girls, and Forbidden Fruit, they all have dual meanings, like euphemisms, and they're sexual innuendos. And it just goes to show the abuse that she is suffering. And I think the poem criticizes unhealthy relationships and the attitude towards consumption, discussing sexual politics like objectification. It's a controversial thing. In Chainsaw versus the Pampas Grass, the themes are power, conflict, gender, and destruction. In the poem, an extended personification of a man's fight against a plant in his summer house is discussed. It has 8 irregular length stanzas and no rhyme, emphasizing the anarchy of man versus nature. The voice is first person in the perspective of the male gardener. The quote grinding its teeth gives us some sound imagery. Juices run from its joints. The alliteration emphasizes the masculinity and the brutality of it. And jewelry of its hair, it contrasts the masculine identity that we're shown through the chainsaw, and it shows the gender battle and the innocent portrayal of women. And I think that this poem criticizes masculinity and the patriarchal running of society. Material by Ross Barber discusses the themes of growth, generations, loss, nostalgia, and it's elegiac. The speaker grows up with her mother, recalling the nostalgia of her childhood, comparing the old and new world. It has 8 line structured stanzas. It's a ballad, using half rhyme, suggesting the uncertainty of self from the poet, and it also uses caesura so that we can reflect. The voice is the first person of the daughter. Mopping the corners of your grief, this is a hyperbole and it emphasizes the handkerchief's function. Always up her sleeve, it shows how her own mother was always prepared, and it suggests that she's insecure about her own style of parenting. The out of tune piano shows a distance between the mother and daughter and generations. And I think this poem explains how style of parenting differs generationally, and it criticizes the industrial postmodern world. We haven't got these material items with, sentimental value. An easy passage has themes like youth, aging, innocence, and gender roles. A teenage girl sneaks back into her house. The speaker reflects on the nostalgia of freedom of adolescence compared to adulthood. The structure is one long stanza, which is relating to life and just the circle of it. It's, not ending. The enjambment reflects the speaker's stream of thoughts, so we can just see her consciously deciding what to say. It's written in free verse, so no rhyme, and it's a monologue. The voice is a third person witness of the girl sneaking back into her house. Half in Love shows that the girl is developing her sexuality. Half Naked, the repetition of half reinforces rebellion and growth, and also how she's in a liminal state. She's at a point of change. Flush Face, obviously, alliteration and fricatives, it just shows the adult tiredness and shows how being an adult is almost undesirable. I think this idea discusses the inevitability of aging and the changing of life courses. The Deliverer has the themes of gender discrimination, infanticide, motherhood, and adoption. The poem follows a convent in India where abandoned girls live and are transferred to adoptive families in the US. It's structured of tercets, two-line stanzas, showing the cultural differences between the USA and India and the broken lives of the children. The voice is a first-person account who is the daughter of one of the deliverers. The phrase "dug up by a dog" uses alliteration and anatomical language, and it just reinforces the insensitivity and violence that the rejected girl babies were submitted to. Doing things right, it shows the cultural differences between the USA and India, but also it suggests that the USA has sort of a cultural superiority complex, that they feel that their culture is, more right and better than others. The empty arms with the full stop emphasizes the end of life for the young girls who are discarded. It explores religious female roles and suggests that adoption is a subconscious act of redemption due to the USA's past of social and racial segregation. This poem discusses that the USA aren't really doing it out of maybe the goodness of their own hearts. It's something of guilt instead. In the Lammas Hireling, the themes are passion, sin, guilt, superstition, and folklore, and it has a lot of homosexual undertones. A farmer hires a man to help on his farm with the cows, but the man is magical. The man's a warlock and turns into a hare, and the narrator shoots him. And at the end, we find out that the man is actually in a confession. The structure is in free verse with no specific rhyme or rhythm to show the natural flow of thoughts of the speaker. He's recalling these events and it feels like he's actually saying it to us. It makes it very realistic. The voice is first person in the perspective of the farmer. The poem says, "I grew fond of company," suggesting the illicit homosexual relations between the farmer and the warlock. Muckle sorrow, muckle care. The repetition shows the superstition. And it's been an hour since my last confession. It reinforces the guilt about being involved in witchcraft and homosexual things. And I think the idea of this poem is to treat nature with respect, as harm can be caused by ignorance. To My 9-Year-Old Self uses the themes of youth, aging, nostalgia, and reflection. An adult looks back on her younger self and wonders if she has disappointed her. The structure has 6 stanzas varying in length, and it uses free verse as no rhyme. The monologue resonates with the spirited nature of young girls. It's got no structure, it's exciting. The voice is the second person of the adult, and some of the language techniques, bad back bruise, the alliteration and plosive show the dullness of adult life. White paper suggests the purity and innocence of a child, and also like a blank slate that children have so much potential. To taste it on your tongue, the fricatives and alliteration make the action more disgusting. And I think the poem acknowledges the divide between innocence and maturity. In a minor role, the themes are isolation, societal expectations, avoidance, separation, truth, and acceptance. An adult explains the struggle and isolation of terminal illness as they manage their patients. It has six irregular length stanzas and irregular line lengths, and this represents the wayward thoughts and unpredictability of the health of the patients. And the punctuation creates a sense of urgency. The voice is the first person of the nurse, or just the witness, the worker. Endless exits and entrances. The alliteration shows how mundane and monotonous, repetitive the tasks are. Midget moments, again, alliteration, shows the speaker is tired. Driving, parking, holding. This is part of an asyndetic list showing the narrator's own suffering at her own tiredness of working with these people, and it suggests that life is precious. Giuseppe has the themes of atrocities, war, humanity, fantasy, and conflict. The speaker listens to his uncle participating in killing a mermaid and tries to justify and rationalize it. It has a free verse structure with a conventional tone. It lacks rhyme, and that shows the realistic recall of the event. The voice is the third person, the nephew, recalling what his uncle told him. The only captive mermaid shows the implausibility of the action and the men preying on the vulnerable. She, it. The enjambment shows the uncertainty of the men, whether she really is a woman or just a fish, and they dehumanize her. Ripe Golden Row, they take away her womanhood, and that's quite critical of the patriarchy. And I think the message of this poem overall is that it is criticizing masculinity's dominion and their control, and ultimately the power that they have over women. The furthest distances I've travelled has the themes of optimism, freedom, cliches, and impermanence. The speaker recalls the thrill of backpacking across the world and wonders how they're back to a mundane life, back in the everyday expectations and rituals. It's structured of 8 quatrains and 3 verse. The lack of meter, rhyme, and couplets show the restrictions of everyday life. The voice is in first person of the traveller herself, and destiny suggests the grandeur of fate, and Lariam shows that she has no fear, only desire to explore. If you don't know, Lariam is a drug you take um, to fight malaria. And like many folk, it suggests the global community of travellers. And I think the idea is to do personally enriching things and to keep the mementos, to keep the souvenirs as memories. Out of the Bag discusses themes like life, birth, mystery, medicine, and family. The poem is about memories of family home births, leading to a broader explanation of where people come from and how they're shaped. It's made up of tercets with an irregular line length and adjournment showing the confusion of children at where they come from. The voice is the first person of a child. All of us came in Dr. Kernan's bag. This is a metaphor for the mystery of medicine and childbirth. Nosy, rosy, big, and soft. This is assonance and very childlike. It's, sort of half rhyme. It sounds like a song almost. Squires in silk light. This archaic imagery shows the doctor's wealth. And I think the poem discusses the idea that adult knowledge can't be taken back. Once you've learned about sexual reproduction, it can't be unlearned. Effects has themes of loss, memory, absence, family, and generations. A mother and son's relationship is explored with the regret the son feels after the mother passes. It is a 50-line stanza showing a stream of conscience and guilt. It's an internal monologue building momentum. It's like a very big and strong release of emotions. The voice is the first person perspective of the son. I held her hand. The alliteration shows his very strong emotions, it's very sentimental. The rings, the repetition shows the sentimental wealth that maintains a connection. Night after night, drink after drink. The repetition and the mirroring just shows his endless despair. And I think the idea is to tighten the gap between intention and action in the way that you say that you'll do something and then you never quite do it. And I think he's saying that whilst you have time to visit, sick loved ones, you need to do it. Genetics has themes of identity, love, nature, society, and family. A poet reflects on their relationship with their parents, showing the complexity of inheritance. The structure is a villanelle. It has 19 lines and 2 repeating refrains. A distinct rhyming structure showing the divide in the DNA, how it's different. The voice is first person and of the child. My father's in my fingers. The alliteration gives a loving and soft tone and shows how that they're connected. Repel to separate lands. Um, the parent's physical love is removed, but the child will always be the embodiment of their relationship, what it once was. Parents make us by our hands, plural pronouns, and it shows us like direct disclosure. Um, she includes the reader or the listener in the poem. The idea is that children are a permanent union of broken relationships. From the Journal of a Disappointed Man, the themes are incompletion, frustration, failure, and it's a man who is observing a construction worker who finds a mysterious problem on the pier, but they eventually give up and abandon the job. It's made up of 11 quatrains in free verse, and it's very repetitive, showing the nature of the masculine construction workers' lives, how monotonous the tasks are. The voice is first person of the man who is watching the construction workers. Chains, pulleys, cranes, ropes. This is an asyndetic list showing the repetitive nature of their job. Let go or hold tight, all monosyllables. It shows how dialect separates people and ultimately how the poet is actually quite judgmental of the workers. Secret problem. This is a metaphor for individuals' lives that even though he's judging these construction workers, everyone has their own personal and intimate struggles. I think the idea is that um, it's a metaphor for life's insoluble problems, that not every not every problem can be solved, and sometimes you just need to walk away from it, like the construction workers walk away from their job. Look We Have Coming to Dover has the themes of identity, society, culture, and transition. A group of immigrants are arriving in the UK very dangerously, but with hopes for the future. The structure has 5 stanzas and 5 lines, which represents the waves of the sea on the Dover beach. And this is concrete poetry where it's actually drawing an image using the words. It's got no regular rhyme and it shows a lack of security for the immigrants upon arriving and when they're being transported. It's in the first person in the perspective of an immigrant, starved in the sea to invade. This is really ironic because they're not invading the UK at all. They're actually coming to improve their lives. And the allusion at the very beginning actually suggests their adoration for the UK, the other poem that it alludes to at the very start. It's basically what that's about. Seagull and shoal life. The alliteration shows the entrapment, and swarms of us is very dehumanizing, and this is a word that maybe would be used in politics by some political parties about the immigrants. And the poem ultimately criticises the fear and stigma of immigrants, that they're really just coming to the UK for a better life. Please Hold includes the themes of society, technology, future, culture, and power. A man is on the phone with a robot repeating unhelpful options. The structure is 52 lines and 2 stanzas, and the line length varies, and the repetition throughout the poem shows the poet's frustration at technology and those around him. It is in the first person, and it's just the man on the phone's perspective. Account and number are repeated throughout, and it shows his frustration. Your future here, which his wife repeats throughout the poem, just shows the impending doom of maybe what the increased technology could actually do to our society. I scream agent. This juxtaposes the wife's calm and robotic state. She repeats the same sentence whilst he's exclaiming over the phone. And it just shows how some people are accepting of technology and some people are entirely rejecting it. And this poem could be criticising the dehumanisation of modern society. On Her Blindness has themes of disability, suffering, helplessness, and stoicism. A mother goes blind and eventually dies. The poem follows his mother's decline in health and the family's behaviour towards the sudden change in her abilities. It is a monologue, and the enjambment throughout shows her disorientation, and there's no rhyme to show disconnect. And this could be between the disconnect in her senses or the understanding of her family members. The voice is the third person, who is the child of the blind woman. Bumping into walls like a dodgem, it's kind of dark humour here. The simile shows the inappropriate coping mechanisms of the family, particularly the male members, as it's the father who says this. In the end, it suggests that the son hasn't gotten closure and uses this sort of fiction way to say that she's died. He doesn't explicitly say that she's died just in the end. He's kind of romanticizing it, suggesting he hasn't quite come to grips with it. Golden weather, of course, obviously, the comma, the enjambment shows that gives us time to process the irony because the mother can't see the weather. The poem could be suggesting that disability is made more difficult by ignoring the struggle and the suffering of the person. Although it's very difficult for family members to accept that one of their own is really struggling, sometimes their coping mechanisms really aren't helpful. Ode on a Grayson Perry, Anne has themes of passage of time, desire, fulfillment, transience, and impermanence. The Anne depicts lives from the modern world that's frozen in time, representing modernity, and it is an allusion to Ode on a Grecian urn. It has 5 stanzas and 10 lines per stanza, and the iambic pentameter usually shows elegance. However, this quite comically contrasts society today. The voice is in the second person of a man, and pensioners and parents, their, alliteration and plosive showing the generational frustration at youths today, how they're so different. Given head, language, showing societal change, it's very crude, it's very explicit. This would be very typically taboo in the past. However, people are much more explicit now. Youth and ecstasy, obviously, ecstasy, there's a dual meaning here. Today, it most usually means drugs, but in the past, it meant happiness, and this just shows the age and generational divide. I think it discusses the idea that beauty is subjective and doesn't always conform to the expectations of society. The urn captures all the different people within society and the changes within it. The gun has themes of power, gender, hunting, and violence. It explores the changes in a house after a gun is introduced. The speaker is at first apprehensive of the gun, but begins to revel in the danger and the use of the gun. The lines vary in length, representing the instability and uncertainty that comes with a gun in the home, and its sudden bursts of violence. It's unpredictable. It's written in free verse, but occasionally assonant half rhyme, adding to the discomforting tone. The use of punctuation and enjambment give the poem a choppy and jarring feel, like the use of the weapon. It is in second person in the perspective of the woman, stretched out like something dead. This reinforces danger and has dramatic irony, as the gun is the killer. The gun isn't dead itself, and is also personification. Jutting over the edge, the gun wants to dominate the table and the entire house. It casts a shadow over the safety and security of no weapons. On the green check cloth, the cloth represents cheerfulness, but these feelings are overtaken by the gun. The two images contrast each other. And I think this poem criticises the growing issue of gun violence. History has themes of war, loss, human nature, and coping, and discusses the effect of historical attacks like 9/11. The structure resembles how the world is shattered after 9/11, and it's again another concrete poem where it has the appearance of waves reflecting the poem's setting. It alternates between the past and the present and uses different iambic pentameters. The voice is in the first person of a man. People jogging. People are trying to distract themselves, but yet there's an odd sense of mundanity as people may be unaware of the news. And also, I think it's quite symbolic. Maybe these people are kind of running away from the fear and dread that they have. Muffled dread, where people replaying fear during and after the event, especially when America got involved in a conflict that people would have preferred to stay out of in case, the terror attacks escalated. Finding evidence of life in all this driftwork. This is just symbolic of the bodies being found in the remains of the tower. And driftwork is things that are carried forward and are swept by the side, like the emotions and lives swept away in 9/11. So the setting is very much reminiscent of the event. And I think this poem, it just simply, tries to put into words the state of transgression and the emotional turmoil the people of the USA and the world was in after 9/11.